Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking the Geneva Press Club for having us here today. There are a number of participants online, and just in terms of some of the general administration for the meeting, if you could please leave questions until the end, and then we have reserved adequate time to address a number of questions at that time. So on behalf of the Medicines for Malaria Venture, I'd like to welcome everyone here today. I'd like to welcome the other speakers, Mr. Wanjun Chang, the CEO of Shin Poong Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Isabel Borghini, Project Director, MMV, on the Pyramax project, Professor Jim Day from the University of Bamako, and also the principal investigator on the Wanam study that we'll be discussing in detail today. And finally, Dr. Stefan Duparc, the Medical Director and Chief Medical Officer of the Medicines for Malaria Venture. What I'd like to do is, as part of this introduction, first turn the floor over to Mr. Wanjun Chang, CEO of Shin Poong Pharmaceuticals, for him to provide a short welcome and introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. David Reddy, for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here today and introduce Shin Poong Pharmaceutical and update you on the development of Pyramax and the current status of Pyramax. Shin Poong is a company established in 1962 in Seoul, Korea, with a core value of for the health of the people. Shin Poong headquarters is located in Korea with 5 subsidiary overseas companies and has presences over 45 countries worldwide. Shin Poong has been one of the major suppliers for the public health products such as broad-spectrum antibiotics and treatment for the schistosomiasis to WHO and World Bank. And this relationship with WHO eventually led Shin Poong to the development project of Pyramax. I would like to briefly update on history of Pyramax. In year 2000, the Memorandum of Understanding between WHO TDR and Shin Poong has signed for the development of new types of anti-malaria, fixed-dose combination of artesunate and pyrrolidine. Together, we have applied for the fundings from the MMV, Medicines for Malaria Venture, in year 2001, and 3-party agreement among WHO TDR, MMV, and Shin Poong was signed in 2001. Year 2011, finally, the product of Pyramax tablet has been registered in Korea, and we were lucky enough to be benefited by Article 58, which was created by the collaboration between European Union and WHO for the development of the medicine in tropical disease. Pyramax tablet and Pyramax granule has been granted positive scientific opinion in 2012 and 2015 respectively. And now the current regulatory status of Pyramax is Pyramax has been registered in 4 countries in Asia and 10 countries in Africa. And the tablet has been included in WHO list of pre-qualification medicines in 2012. For the Pyramax granule, the positive opinion has been granted to Pyramax granule from EMA 2015 and enlisted in pre-qualification medicine list since March 2016. And now we are invited to participate in WHO pilot procedure for collaborative registration of SRA-approved medicine in 10 core African countries for the potential speed up in registration. Thank you very much, and I will turn the floor back to Dr. David Reddy.
Many thanks, Mr. Chang. Before I begin my introduction, I'd just like to pay special tribute to the chairman and founder of Shin Poong Pharmaceuticals, Mr. Chang, who died earlier this year, and to say that it was really through his foresight, through committing both himself and his company's resources, that we have the partnership today that we have, and we have this new anti-malarial drug in Pyramax. And also our huge thanks to the CEO, Mr. Chang, for carrying this vision forward in the pursuit of new data to continue the saga of this very important drug. I'd now like to begin just perhaps going to the real heart of this, and that is malaria, and why this is so important. And so if you look at where we are in malaria today, over the last 15 years, we've been able to significantly reduce both the burden of malaria, but also the mortality associated with malaria. We estimate that since the year 2000, if we were to look at the number of deaths that were occurring then, and the number of deaths or the number of lives that had been saved over that time by the introduction of long-lasting insecticide-treated nets and the new ACT therapies, that something in the order of 6.2 million lives have been saved through that commitment and those interventions, including 5.9 million children under 5 years of age. This represents a 60% reduction in mortality overall. And perhaps very importantly, it's more than a 70% reduction in children under 5 years of age dying in Africa from malaria. However, we can't rest because there are still around 430,000 people dying every year from malaria. 70% of these are children less than 5 years of age. In addition, we have new threats facing us. We have the threat of artemisinin resistance, but also resistance to the partner drugs in the greater Mekong region in Southeast Asia. And therefore, what this tells us is we need to continue to pursue malaria, to prioritize malaria, and to develop new interventions against this drug so we can continue to reduce the number of deaths, so that we can stay ahead of resistance, and also so that we can begin to realize the objectives that have been set in the Sustainable Development Goals of ending the malaria epidemic by the year 2030. Now, the development of new drugs, though they're urgently needed, is both a time-consuming and a risky endeavor. And if you look at this slide, it really shows the number of mountains that have to be climbed, if you like, going through the early studies in phase 1 studies in healthy volunteers, through to the proof of concept patient studies, and then into those large phase 3 confirmatory studies. And this is complicated even more by the environment, the challenging environment that these studies need to be conducted in. And it's I think it's a very important reflection that often if we look at the types of studies we do in the pharmaceutical industry in Europe and the United States, they are relatively simple compared to the challenges of conducting those same studies in some of the environments where they're conducted in Africa and Southeast Asia. And this is a real tribute to the investigators and their teams that are involved in these studies. One of the key elements or the key ingredients to success in global health today is through partnership. And in this slide, we're trying to illustrate some of the partners that have been involved in the development of Pyramax, the artemisinin combination treatment that we're discussing today. Clearly, our partner Shin Poong Pharmaceuticals, the WHO, who are part of this in the very inception of this initiative, but also other partners, including the clinical research organizations that are with us today also, that have really driven this program through ahead, hand in hand with us. The donors that have supported this program, the National Malaria Control Programs and Ministries of Health, have all come together and moved this project ahead. And to look at this in another way, this is a global perspective. And this map shows the different sites, the different areas that are involved, going from some of our collaborators, such as Professor Fleckenstein in Iowa, through to clinical trial sites in Southeast Asia, in Africa, MMV zone presence in Switzerland. And so you can see, really, this has been a global effort. Now, in order to achieve this and to undertake the studies, a first point that must be considered is that we develop only one standard of quality, and that is the highest. And so, to paraphrase things in the words of the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Chan, there are no poor drugs for poor people. There is only one quality standard. And so what this has meant is that in the clinical studies that have been set up and conducted in Asia and in Africa, there's been a component of capacity building to ensure that there is that rigor and that really that first-class quality of development of good clinical practice. And that's been one of the key ingredients to success. As a result of that, Pyramax was submitted for approval, firstly with the Korean FDA and with the European Medicines Agency. And again, this is a testament to quality, where stringent regulatory authorities have reviewed and approved the drug. And in the case of the EMA, as you'll hear, this was through Article 58, which is a very special provision designed to provide a scientific opinion for a drug that actually won't be used in the European Union, but will be used elsewhere. Now, based upon the data that was provided, the EMA identified that there were certain areas that would benefit from additional data, namely liver safety and also repeated administration of the drug. So the initial indication or approval was in a very narrow region, mainly for resistance containment and single use, but also with a requirement for liver enzyme monitoring. What you'll hear today is that this collaboration was then asked to provide additional data, and it followed through on that commitment. And the data has been provided. And on the basis of that, it has confirmed the safety and the efficacy of this drug. And so it has given confidence that the drug can now be used in the absence of liver monitoring. The geographic scope can be increased, and it can be used in a wider population of patients. But also, very importantly, is our commitment to pediatric patients, because at the very beginning, I mentioned that around 70% of deaths are in children less than 5 years of age. This is not lip service. So in parallel to the development of this compound for adults, the pediatric development program was moved ahead, and at the same time as the recent approval of the new indication by the European Medicines Agency, they also approved pediatric granules for use in small children. So on the basis of these new data, it provides confidence for increased use of Pyramax that goes beyond the current resistance containment area and moves out into wider Asia, Africa, Latin America, and then also to include the small children that will benefit from the pediatric formulation that has just been approved. So what this now means is that we now have a drug that is well studied for both Vivax and for falciparum. It is administered once a day over a period of 3 days. It doesn't have food effects, and it is available in both adult and pediatric formulations. And it also now has answered many of the safety questions that had been posed. And so what the collaboration will now do is they are intent on working with partners to secure policy change, additional national registrations, and then changes in local guidelines to ensure that this important drug gets to the patients that ultimately need it. Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn over to Dr. Isabel Borghini. Isabel will now take you through an overview of the Pyramax development plan.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the opportunity to present Pyramax to you today. I see friends and colleagues in the room, so I'm very glad to be able to present the development program in a little bit more details. So really, the development of Pyramax has been a prime example of the type of collaborative partnership that MMV fosters in order to discover, to develop, and to deliver new anti-malarial drugs for those who need them the most. And in this instance, for this project, Pyramax, the partners have been Shin Poong Pharmaceutical from South Korea, who are present here. There have been also Professor Larry Fleckenstein from University of Iowa, who brought into our project team the specialization of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, and then MMV, who brought their knowledge of malaria and clinical development more broadly. So our partnership model is to value the expertise of all the partners, each and every one of the partners, to share our skills and to share our resources. So what is Pyramax? Pyramax is a combination therapy for malaria. It is a combination of pyronaridine, an antimalarial that has been synthesized back in the 1970s from China, and artesunate, which is a derivative from the Artemisia annua plant. So basically, Pyramax is an artemisinin-based combination therapy, an ACT. It is a new one because pyronaridine has not been used in previous ACTs. And it fulfills WHO criteria because it is a fixed dose combination. So it means it's a co-formulation of those two active substances into one single tablet. In fact, it comes into two formulations, tablets, film-coated tablets, and granules, which present in sachets and which are particularly well adapted for the very young patients. The film-coated tablets of Pyramax are indicated for patients who weigh 20 kilograms of body weight or more, and they are administered once a day for 3 days, for 3 consecutive days. The granules are for patients who are down to 5 kilograms of body weight. So immediately you see they are well adapted to the really young babies that we need to treat. They are administered 1 to 3 sachets, which are suspended in a small volume of liquid. It can be water, it can be the milk from the mom. And they are really child-friendly in the sense that they are taste masked, so there is no bitter taste to this granule suspension that can be administered to those young babies. In a nutshell, this product is really adapted to the field, to the target population that needs it most. It means it is indicated both for the treatment of Plasmodium falciparum malaria and also for the treatment of Plasmodium vivax malaria. So immediately you see that in areas where the distinction between the two parasites is difficult because they are maybe undersourced, this drug will fit for both infections. It is highly and rapidly efficacious. The median parasite clearance time is around 24 hours, and the fever clearance time is around 15 hours. So patients feel much better very quickly. It's generally well tolerated. It has a simple regimen, and this is very important in the field. Again, it's a once daily for 3-day treatment. It does not require any specific testing to follow up the patients during the treatment. It has no food restriction. This means it can be taken with or without food, depending on whether the patient is hungry or not, it can be taken. For the Vivax indication, it's very important also that Pyramax can be co-administered with Primaquine. So this is the drug that will take care of curing the dormant form of the hypnozoites that are hiding in the patient's liver. So Pyramax can be part of a radical cure treatment for patients who have contracted P. vivax. It has a long shelf life of 2 years, and it is stable in hot and very humid conditions. So these are the target climates that we need to work in. It has been tested specifically for those conditions. So what was the development overall? It was a broad global development program which started many years ago with the first in human phase 1 study in healthy volunteer. That is the first time you administer the drug to human beings. And then we went on to carry out 2 rather small phase 2 studies. Those are dose range finding studies, which are carried out, we carried out 1 in adults and 1 in the pediatric population. And with this data in hand, we went on and carried out a large phase 3 confirmatory program of clinical trials. There were 4 phase 3 clinical studies that we carried out both in falciparum and in Vivax patients. In parallel to this, we also carried out a number of phase 1 studies in healthy volunteers, such as drug-drug interaction studies, because our patients sometimes need to take other drugs concomitantly to an antimalarial. They are on other drugs for other diseases. We've done a mass balance study to study how the drug distributes in the human body, and we've done a relative bioavailability study to compare the 2 formulations also. So really an extensive package of clinical data. In these clinical studies, we have studied 1 single malaria episode, which we have treated and followed up for 42 days as per the WHO protocol. Then we also partnered with the Wanam network, about which Professor Jim Day here today will tell you more about. But the Wanam network, we have partnered with them to carry out a longitudinal study in patients. So this is a type of study where patients present with a malaria attack, are treated with an ACT, and then are followed up for 2 years. And every time they catch malaria again, they will be retreated with the same ACT over and over again if needed. So it really broadens the type of information on the safety and efficacy of repeat treatment with the same drug. And it compares 4 ACTs, of which Pyramax. So overall, more than 4,200 patients have been treated with Pyramax as part of the clinical development program to date, of whom a big proportion of the very young babies. And this data is all published in peer-reviewed journals, which you will find in your handouts. This is to give you an idea of the type of geographic location where we carry out our trials to ICH GCP standards. So in this instance, we carried out trials in 23 different hospitals, clinical sites, in 18 different malaria endemic countries. From West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, we had also sites in India and in Southeast Asia, a number of countries. So there was a special emphasis on quality, on good clinical practice, good laboratory practice, good manufacturing practice, because our aim was to register this drug with the European Medicines Agency, a stringent regulatory authority to begin with. And there was also an element of capacity strengthening, whereby we had to invest in infrastructure, in training, and also in buying the same equipment throughout all the sites to ensure really a harmonization of the data that we were collecting as part of this program. So when I said that this drug is highly efficacious, you can see here the type of cure rates that Pyramax demonstrates. So these are the phase 3 trials where Pyramax were compared to the standard of care in those countries where we carried out the trials. And we see that the cure rates with Pyramax were systematically greater than 95% cure using the WHO defined endpoint. And systematically also from a statistical perspective, the non-inferiority of Pyramax to the standard of care was demonstrated. So this was true for the falciparum malaria patients and also for the Vivax malaria patients. And this was true both using tablet formulation and granule formulation for the kids. So I won't go into the many details. here, but the history was that this project commenced as a joint venture with WHO TDR. And then it went on to full development with the partnership that we described until the time in 2010 where we submitted the entire package, the dossier, to the European Medicines Agency through Article 58. We, in fact, received the positive scientific opinion, the approval, in 2012 for the Pyramax tablets, and this was also followed by the listing on the list of WHO pre-qualified medicines shortly thereafter. Yet the label that was granted at the time was rather restrictive because we had not generated yet the data on the safety and efficacy of using this drug more than once in the same patient. So that's when we endeavored and collaborated with the Wanam network, and the longitudinal study was started. Based on data that we obtained from this longitudinal study, where we were reassured of the safety and efficacy of Pyramax when used repeatedly, we submitted to EMA what is called a label variation to ask them whether they would agree to lift the restrictions. And we also submitted the dossier for the granules for the pediatric indication. And recently, in November 2015, both have been approved. It means that both the broader label for the tablets has been approved, as well as the granule dossier has received the positive scientific opinion. And more recently, the Pyramax granules have been added onto the list of WHO pre-qualified medicines. So this is where we stand to date, rather very happy, proud, I can say, with the new EMA-approved indication for Pyramax. The tablet formulation of Pyramax is indicated for the treatment of malaria patients starting at 20 kilograms of body weight. The granule child-friendly formulation is indicated for the very young patients starting at 5 kilograms of body weight. And there is this special wording in the approved label which says that Pyramax has been administered to patients who have had repeated episodes of malaria and has been shown to be similarly well tolerated on repeat dosing as for the first dosing. So we now have a strong label with our drug that has been approved by EMA. Of course, it is not the end of the story. It's actually only the beginning, because ultimately what we want to ensure is access to this important medicine to the patients in the countries where they need it. So we are now working very closely still with Shin Poong. In fact, Shin Poong is working closely with us to work on the local national registrations, and Mr. Chang has indicated the number of countries where Pyramax tablets have already been approved, and the fact that we are also working with the WHO collaborative registration pilot, which should ensure a quicker approval in a big number of African countries. So on this, I leave you, and I want to thank, obviously, all the patients, their parents who have taken part in those trials, the investigators and their dedicated teams in the field, and our partners here. Thank you.
Isabel, thank you very much for that presentation. It's now my pleasure to introduce Professor Jim Day from the University of Bamako, who has led the West African Collaborative Network, Wanam, to generate the critically important results around the retreatment with Pyramax. And a huge thanks to him and this network of investigators for bringing forward this quality data that was required, and also for the way in which they've cared for the patients who were so absolutely critical to the development of any medication like Pyramax. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will be going through the clinical studies that were, which data was used to support the label variation and line extension applications that were described by Isabel. And thanks to MMV for inviting me and providing this opportunity. this actually started as an investigator-initiated project. We in West Africa, in response to a call for application by the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trial Partnership, EDCTP, were looking for additional ACTs to add to the choices of drugs that we have. And in looking around, our attention was caught by the artesunate pyronidine, Pyramax. But back then, the restrictions in the use of this new ACT, which was once in a lifetime, made it no good for Africa. And we wanted to assess whether this drug could be used safely in African children. And that was the basis of our application to EDCTP, and that brought us in this partnership with the Pyramax team. And we formed a network of 8 countries, 4 in Africa and 4 in Europe, to start in collaboration with the MMV and the rest of the Pyramax team, this phase 3B4 study, a longitudinal study where each patient included in randomized into the study would be followed for 2 years, and with every episode will receive the same drug. As you may know, in sub-Saharan Africa, each child experiences, on average, 3 to more episodes of malaria each season. So this data was required to assess the safety and the continued efficacy. The study started in October 2011. And we expect the final results to be available by July of 2016. We conducted the study in West Africa, in 3 countries of West Africa, Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. And despite the progress that have been made in the fight against malaria, malaria is still a major problem in these places, especially in the rural areas, in these type of villages where a lot of children bear an unacceptable burden to the malaria. So the challenge is to be able to run a state-of-the-art clinical study in this sort of environment, and that's led to an intensive capacity development to be able to set up laboratories like this in villages where you have no electricity and no running water. So we were able to successfully do that in all these 3 countries using the same equipment and the same protocol to conduct studies with ICH and GCP compliant manner. So the primary objectives was to assess the safety of the repeated administration of Pyramax during recurrent episodes of malaria, with the main aim being to demonstrate the non-inferiority of Pyramax repeated dosing to the first dosing. So we used a stringent protocol that was regularly monitored by quintiles to assess its compliance with international regulations, where we looked at the adverse events, vital signs, blood, liver, and kidney toxicity, as well as cardiac toxicity at each cases of malaria that were included. To cut a long story short, this is the number of patients that were included in the study, 4,722, and these patients experienced a little less than 14,000 episodes of malaria. As you can see in this table, these are the total number of episodes that the patients experience, and some of them you can see have experienced up to 13 episodes during the 2 years of follow-up, which means they have been having malaria every other month. And this brings a lot of health problems that these kids have tend to experience. The graph here shows the incidence of adverse events that that occurred in these patients in red during the first episode of malaria, and followed by the episode that occurred 1 to 2 months after the first one, and followed by adverse events that occurred 2 to 3 months after the first episode and beyond that. And as you can see, the incidence of adverse events when you compare the subsequent episodes to the first episode was, if anything, lower. If you look at any adverse event, as well as when you look at drug-related adverse event, as well as the few serious adverse events that occurred. So the a subsequent episode had, if anything, less adverse events than the initial episode. On the overall safety conclusions were that specifically looking at the hepatotoxicity, there was, if anything, less hepatotoxicity events that occurred during the subsequent episode as compared to the initial to the initial episode. And this was the case no matter which age bracket and weight that you looked at. On the efficacy front, as Isabel was saying, the molecular corrected cure rate was at least 95% and similar between the Pyramax and the comparator drugs that were assessed, in which case, in this case, artemether lumefantrine. So this was a very large study, a very complex study that I'm going to give you a bit of flavor of what it looked like. We had to follow up to 14,000 malaria cases for 2 years each. It's a view of one of our study sites where you can, as you can see, there was no shortage of patients needing care in these facilities. And each of these malaria cases were extensive data recorded in these books that we have 14,000 books like that for to capture all the clinical, laboratory, toxicity, efficacy data that were obtained through microscope slides that were prepared and read on site, through dried blood spots that were used for the molecular analysis. We performed up to 30,000 EKGs to assess the cardiotoxicity of the drug, and all of the data was recorded live by the data entry clerks in each of the study sites. And we performed more than 60,000 biochemistry assays and another 60,000 hematology assays to assess the blood and kidney toxicity. And this was done in the context of rural Africa, where sometimes there is no road to reach where you want to work. And in the Wanam team, where this is one of a view of a meeting of the Wanam team, had to work through very difficult situations. As some of you who are following the news would know, we had to undergo a military coup in Mali, invasion of the north of Mali by jihadist groups, all that were happening while we had to continue the study because we couldn't stop. In Burkina Faso as well, a civil revolution happened during the study, followed by another military coup there. And on top of all of this, the Ebola crisis was happened in Guinea, in the site where one of the studies was ongoing. So despite all these odds, we were able to perform these studies to the highest standard as assessed by the monitoring that has been continuing. So I'll just finish by thanking all of the colleagues that participated in these studies, and above all, the study communities that contribute to the providing the patient, and the tireless field teams that works in very difficult situations to provide this data, and the support from our respective government and funders. And thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Jimdo, thank you, and thank you for conducting the study under what was, everybody can see now, to be incredibly complex conditions and so many unforeseen events. So I think many of these are so tragic, but the fact that committed individuals such as yourselves can pursue the causes of global health throughout such events is a real testament to all of you. Thank you. I'd like now to introduce the final speaker, the Chief Medical Officer of MMV, Dr. Stefan Duparc, and he has two presentations to give. So he'll be talking firstly about what's next for Pyramax, and then also to give you a little more detail on Pyramax granules for children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. So, as you can see on this presentation, it's not my name. It was normally Michael Ramarter who was supposed to present this slide, but he's sick. By chance, I know a little bit about this study as we collaborate closely with Michael, who is professor in Vienna and also professor at the Hospital Albert Schweitzer in Lambaréné in Gabon. So, as you know from the beginning of this presentation, we got a positive opinion with EMA Article 58 at the end of last year. And we have been asked with the risk management plan of the registration to do some additional work. And we have been asked to do a post-registration study to enhance real-life safety surveillance under enlarged conditions. And these conditions are in case of retreatment. It was done already with a Wanam study, but more data are always interesting. We need to have also some work regarding the usage of Pyramax in case of co-infections. The main point of this study also is to see what's happened in patients who would have abnormal liver function before treatment. So there is no systematic liver testing that will be done in this study. We will also test very small children. We have been asked to have at least 5% of children under the age of 1 year. And also we will have a special look at patients with malnutrition. So the aim of this study is to confirm the safety of Pyramax in a real-world sub-Saharan African setting. So for that, I have said before, we will not exclude patients as they are excluded normally during phase 3 program. So we will take patients with abnormal AST, ALT, and we will retreat the patient in this study, as I told you. And again, we need to have data in special population, like the very young children, but also in patients with co-infections, like HIV, chronic hepatitis, or any other chronic diseases. So CANTAM, what means this acronym? So it's the Central African Network on Tuberculosis, HIV, AIDS, and Malaria. This network was established in 2008 with EDCTP funding. And it's an association of 4 countries from the south, Gabon, Cameroon, Republic of Congo, and DRC, and 3 countries from the north, Germany, France, and UK. As you can see, the lead of this CANTAM is Francine and Toumi. There is a picture of Francine on this slide. So for the study, where are the study sites? So in fact, we will work in the 4 countries, and we will have sites in Buea in Cameroon, around Brazzaville in Congo, in Kimpese and Kinshasa in DRC, and in Libreville and Lambaréné in Gabon. So the study design, what is the primary objective? The primary objective is to identify hepatic safety events in a subgroup of malaria patients enrolled with liver transaminases abnormal, greater than 2 times the upper limit of normal. But it will be in patients that have this increase without clinical sign or symptom of hepatotoxicity. The blood will be taken before treatment, but the blood will be analyzed only after treatment. So the patient will be recruited even if they have abnormal AST, ALT. The secondary objective is quite easy. It's the same, but we will compare this arm of patients with abnormal LFTs at inclusion to an arm of patients without abnormality regarding LFTs at inclusion. The other objective are the following. We will evaluate the safety in presence of other hepatic illness, as I said before, HIV status when it is known, because we will not test the patient for HIV in the study. Also, we will check what's happened depending on the nutritional status, the age, and the weight of the patient. We will also assess the occurrence of hepatic-related adverse events with or without AST, ALT abnormalities, and the administration of concomitant medicine. We will also evaluate the safety and tolerability during pregnancy. We will not exclude pregnant women from this study. If they know they are pregnant, they will not be recruited, but we will not do any test to verify if they are pregnant or not. And finally, we will evaluate the efficacy and the compliance when the drug is used under usual conditions. Regarding the sample size, so we need to have 120 patients with abnormal LFTs before treatment. So from calculation, from the incidence of the number of patients having abnormal LFTs we have seen in previous study, we have calculated that we need a total of 8,572 malaria cases in the study. So to be able to reach this number in the 7 sites from the 4 countries, we expect to have to recruit over 1 or maybe 2 years, so it will take at least 24 months to get this data, to get all this data. So it is a request from the EMA, so we need to have a very stringent mechanism for the pharmacovigilance. So all the serious adverse events will be analyzed and reported in real time for each site. Regarding adverse events, we will have a continuous reporting. All will be coordinated by the Central Pharmacovigilance Center at the University of Kinshasa, and they will report to the WHO Collaborating Center in Ghana and also in Uppsala. As I told you, it's a request from EMA, so in the same time we will report all the safety events to the EMA. And to ensure the safety of the patient in this study, we will have a 3-monthly data safety monitoring board meeting with experts in hepatotoxicity that will assess the safety data in all the sites. Regarding the milestone of this project, so the final version of the protocol was submitted to the EMA in October 2015. They came back with a positive answer at the end, mid-November. We had our first investigator meeting in Brazzaville at the end of October. We now expect to submit the protocol to the local regulatory and ethics committee by the end of this month. And we expect now to have the first patient in by the end of September this year. So that's all for this Quantum presentation. And I will move directly to the second presentation, which is more focused on the pediatric need and the interest of these Pyramax granules in the therapeutic of malaria. Just to remind you, this is some sentence I copied from the World Malaria Report published at the end of last year. So according to this report, there is 214 million of cases of malaria with 438,000 deaths which were reported in 2015. Most of these malaria cases, which is 188 million, are estimated to have occurred in the W African region, where children under 5 years of age bear the most of this burden. Most of the malaria deaths, which are 394,000, which is an estimation from the WHO, have been reported in Africa. And the number of cases in children under 5 years of age is 292,000. So it's in fact 74% of children dying of malaria under 5 years of age in Africa. So as you can see, it's still very big numbers. So there is still a big need for appropriate child-friendly formulation of ACTs. This comes from the WHO pre-qualification site. So as you can see, the last child-friendly formulation treatment that was registered or pre-qualified was Coartem, and it happened in 2009. There is 2 other ACTs that can be used in children because they are soluble, ASAQ and ASMQ, but they are very bitter. There is no test masking, and the bitter test can stay very long in the mouth, so it's something that is easy to take, but really not good at all for the children, and they can spit easily these drugs. So the good news, and you are here for that, we have got in March 2016 the pre-qualification of pyronaridine artesunate, Pyramax, which is the second child-friendly treatment, and these are granules at the difference of the Coartem. So the development of drug in pediatric is really a priority for MMV, but it's not something easy to do. In most of the cases, people develop drugs for adults and they register the drug, and after, if it's really needed, they do the development in children. It's the reason why EMA has created the PIP, the Pediatric Investigational Plan, to push the company and to oblige the company to do this work. But for malaria, the child formulation is really a priority, as malaria is a pediatric disease. So we have to work to define the route of delivery. Do we use dispersible tablet, granule, or suppository? We need to identify the appropriate excipient, the flavoring agent, the test masking agent. The palatability is also very important because the test acceptance can impact on the patient compliance. There is a big difference in test perception between adults and children, and if it is the case, we will prioritize on the test for the children. We have also decided to start clinical trial in the pediatric population as soon as possible, after having get data, preclinical data. Clinical data in adults on the single agents, and we need to have the safety, tolerability, and the proof of efficacy, as well as the PK, before we can start working in the combination. And also we need to have data on drug-drug interaction and the optimal dose that has been identified in adults. There is also a need to do studies in neonate and infant, and in general it's something that is not done during the first set of studies. It's something that is done post-registration, and it is now based on modeling and simulation on the safety, tolerability, efficacy, and PK, but also on the long-term safety. We need to be sure that it doesn't affect the growth or the neurodevelopment of the neonates. So here is a slide to show you what was done in the past regarding development of pediatric drugs. So we were doing first a phase 2B in adults. Then we had the development of the phase 2B in children, followed by 2 phase 3, one more in adults in Asia and one more in children in Africa. In parallel, we were developing the pediatric formulation, but that was not done before approval. So after getting the approval with the pediatric formulation, it was possible to do a second phase 3 study in children, to do some phase 4 real-life study, like the one which is requested by the EMA for Pyramax, and to do some 2-year phase 4 repeated dose longitudinal study. It is needed if we want to be able to have to retreat the patient, to have a label without restriction regarding the number of treatments that can be given to children. And that is a study that was done with Professor Jim Day. And after, as I told you, we need to work on the unmet need for the very young children under 5 kilos or 6 months of age, but it was done only after the second approval. Now we plan in our development, and it's what we have started to do with our new compound OZ. We try to integrate adults and children in the same phase 2B study, so we can gain a little bit of time. This kind of study is longer than each of the studies, but the total is a little bit shorter. And after that, so you need to develop the pediatric formulation in parallel to be able to do the phase 3 in adults and children for Asia and in children for Africa with the pediatric formulation. Also, we need to start as soon as possible with the patient from Africa, a 1-year follow-up study with a longitudinal study to get data on redosing, as we can, before the end of the process of approval, have enough data to have a better label, a label where you can only treat patient once. And it's after this approval that you will do the phase 4 real-life post-marketing study and the phase 4 study in the children under 5 kilos. For Pyramax, we have started before the work on the new rule. So it was a little bit mixed between what was done in the past and what we plan to do now. So by chance, Shin Poong is a company with a lot of experience to produce tablets and granule. So it was easy to start the CMC work and to start the fabrication of the granule. So we have done one phase 2B in adults, and in parallel we have done this work on the granule. And after that we have been able to do the phase 2B study in children, followed by 3 phase 3 against P. falciparum, 2 with the tablets, and this one was done with a granule. After that, we got the first approval, but in fact, we didn't have enough data in pediatric subjects, and we have decided to postpone the submission of the Pyramax granule. And we have used the data from the study done with Professor Jim Day to submit the granule in 2014 and to get the approval of the granule at the end of last year. Now the plan, and it's requested by EMA, and it's what I showed you in the previous presentation, is to do this phase 4 trial with the Quantum network. So for Pyramax, as I told you, we got the line extension with the EMA for children between 5 and 20 kilos. It was based on the previous phase 3 trial I show you that was done before the first registration with the granule, and we had 355 patients between 5 and 25 kilos in this study. We also got some relative bioavailability study to compare the bioavailability of the tablet to the granule. And we have done the longitudinal study, and in this study we got 591 children between 5 and 20 kilos. We also used this study to get some additional PK data. And we were asked also to do some additional work regarding the CMC, which was done. Following this work and this submission, we got in November last year the positive opinion by the EMA for the Pyramax granule. So to conclude, malaria is still a major cause of death in children. The administration of medicine to sick young children is a challenge if you don't have an appropriate formulation. So Pyramax is the first child-friendly medicine which has been registered in the last 7 years. And Pyramax fulfills a medical need in the population which is the most affected by malaria. Thank you. And I will give you back the floor.
Thanks very much, Stefan. Okay, thank you to all the speakers, and I'll make a few summary comments at the end, but before then, questions, and I'll look also to our host just to ask what the procedure is for obtaining questions from those people who are online. Okay, so please send in questions if you have any. In the meantime, any questions from the room? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Jutta Reinhardrup from... Regarding the taste masking, can you say something how you did this taste masking? And did you do a taste study in children? Because on your slide you said taste for children is very much differently perceived than in adults, and I can confirm this. So did you do a taste study with Pyramax?
So I can answer to the fact that Pyramax granules are taste masked, but are not taste flavored. It was a decision up front from the manufacturer, from our project team. Now, exactly, if you want some information on the way to taste mask, do you want to take this question? It's coated in a certain excipient.
Microencapsulation.
It's micro-encapsulated, exactly. Mm. And it's also very important for the two components, the peronaridine and artesunate, not to interact with each other. Mm. We did not. But with our initial phase 2, we had one study arm where children were administered with the granules. So we already collected information on the acceptability. And then we have a lot of information on the acceptability as part of the study drug administration parameters. But we did not do a taste study per se.
Thank you very much, and first of all, congratulations to MMV and Shin Poong for the development of the drug, and the slide that Isabelle showed how the different steps of development was quite interesting, and the time and the success all over the time. I have a couple of questions, and not necessarily related, but more or less. It's regarding the future of Pyramax, and I understand that EMA gave some direction, but I see in real life there are two that are missing, and particularly one which is pregnancy. As you might know, WHO will most probably review the position on using artemisinin in the first trimester. And what is your knowledge on pyronaridine toxicity? You must most probably have some cases of women who became pregnant on the artesunate pyronaridine, and you must have followed them up. What is your knowledge? Because we have some knowledge for other ACTs. The other, of course, is real life. Is what about association? I read the recommendation. The association with antiretroviral. I mean, this needs to be further evaluated, especially if you want. And then I would be interested to hear what would be the point of view of using Pyramax as a drug for mass drug administration, because you know that MDA is top on the agenda by many researchers and many donor agencies. So what would be your position on using Pyramax on a wide scale like MDA, like it's currently done with another ACT? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Pascal for the questions. So we have had 11 pregnancies during the study. It was 7 during the phase 3 and 4 in post-registration. It seems we didn't have any problems. The child had no problem. We had just one problem, but because the mother had a car accident, so it's not related to the drug. So there is no, from what we know, there is no problem. Also, we have been contacted by a group from West Africa with Umberto D'Alessandro. They got a first positive opinion by EDCTP to do a study with Pyramax during pregnancy. So we work with them, we will review the protocol. Shin Poong will provide the drug, so some work will be done to get better knowledge on what's happened during pregnancy. So it is planned. That is the answer for the first question. The second question, the usage with ARVs. So we work closely with a group in the US who is doing this SIMSIP estimation. So it's something that we should probably do to see what's happened when we use Pyramax with different ARVs. We have done one study with ritonavir already, but it's true it's not all what is used in Africa. So I think the most important is to do some SIMSIP simulation to see what will happen. And the last question is regarding Pyramax mass drug administration. It's something that we have been asked by Gates Foundation if it would be possible to do studies to assess the usage of Pyramax for this indication. We need to do some small study, preliminary study before to ensure that we will not have any risk by doing this kind of work. But it's something that we are discussing with Gates currently. And it shows that it will be important to have the drug in the therapeutic for the mass drug administration.
And if I can just comment on that for a moment. Thank you. I think that in pursuing the strategy, one thing that will be absolutely critical is the systematic collection of information, particularly safety information as we move ahead. And Pascal, you, in the first part of your question, you identified a particularly vulnerable group, and that is pregnant women within this. So we need to look holistically as we move ahead. There are a number of different populations, and as one approaches the question of mass drug administration, it's ensure that we need to ensure we have that systematic collection of information across each of these groups. So thank you.
We had something, there is currently some mass drug administration study in Mozambique. So not with Pyramax, but with other drugs. And we work closely with the people in Mozambique to have a pregnancy registry where we will collect all the pregnant data, safety information during this study. And if one day someone uses Pyramax in this indication, we will also set up a pregnancy registry probably to collect the data and to report the data to the EMA.
We have one question online from Esther Lasri. She's asking, what is the half-life of pyranadiene, and does it provide any post-treatment protection?
So until now, we saw the half-life was 14 days, and there is a very recent article that show probably the half-life is even longer. So there is a good post-treatment prophylaxis, which is not far from the one we can see with piperaquine. It's a lot better than what you can see with lumefantrine, and probably it's quite similar to the one of amodiaquine. And we will have better idea when the data from the Wanam study will be published, because one of the primary endpoint of the study is to look at the number of cases of malaria that a patient will have over the 2-year period between the different treatments. So we will have a better answer on this question as soon as it will be published. We hope to have the result, as we told you before, mid-year, and to have a publication early next year.
Maybe one question from me. So I know it's a technical briefing, but what about the price structure of the drug, and what is the next step maybe for for this Pyramax. Thank you very much.
Regarding the price structure, the price of this medicine has been one of the key issues since the beginning of this whole project. And MMV and Shin Poong, we all know how important it is to have this the high quality medicine with the affordable price. But what I can say now here is the price will be very competitive with the existing medicines and treatment, and it will be affordable for the patient as well. Thank you.
Any last questions? Okay, well, I'd just like to thank everybody today. This really is a story of partnership and of commitment. And it's a commitment to addressing the problem of malaria. And just to cite that figure again, that we're still seeing more than 430,000 deaths a year from malaria. We do have the threat of resistance, and we need to continue the push, the global momentum against this disease, and also continue to develop new drugs such as Pyramax. The critical nature of these drugs is that if we have alternatives available to us like this, we can have multiple approaches to first-line therapy and perhaps delay the emergence of resistance while we really shrink the malaria map. This is also a commitment to following up and addressing knowledge gaps. And you can see today that Shin Poong and MMV followed through on that commitment to address some of the outstanding questions, but also to extend the utility of this drug to small children through the development of the pediatric formulation. But that isn't where the partnership ends, because the partnership now needs to continue to move ahead to incorporate the new data, the new indication into policy, into national approvals and guidelines, and ultimately into treatment practice to bring this new drug to those that need it most. So I'd like to thank you all, the people here today, and those of you who are online, and my fellow speakers, and also just to reiterate our thanks to Shin Poong, a South Korean company that has seen this journey all of the way, and also to the investigators and patients who have been involved in this study, and without whom none of this would be possible. Thank you very much.